meaning the dictionary is close to the date of 1776 that is available, defines the word simply as absolute or unlimited power. So it is fair to conclude that the Founding Fathers felt that King George was creating a tyrannical government in America by stealing the sovereignty of the American people and replacing it with his own. And that was the reason they were breaking the bonds with the English government. So our Founding Fathers knew what the word tyranny meant, and to further prove that, the writers of the Constitution actually attempted to further define the word in the Declaration of Independence itself. They listed 30 specific evidences in the Declaration of the fact that King George was guilty of creating an oppressive totalitarian government, meaning a tyranny in the United States. The 22nd of these is the one that clearly addresses the issue. He, meaning King George, has given his assent to the suspending of our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. That is the key phrase in red. Legislate in all cases whatsoever. That is the very definition of tyranny. There are no limits to that grant of power. They were grabbing absolute, dictatorial, tyrannical power. There is no Magna Carta, no Bill of Rights, no Constitution to protect the rights of the people. It is absolute power. The Constitution was issued in 1787, 11 years after the Declaration. The following is from the preamble of the Constitution. We the people, notice the people, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It was here that the crime of our Founding Fathers was first started, because the Founding Fathers actually created two separate governments inside the Constitution, and they gave one of them absolute tyrannical power. So they had to build a front in order to conceal their crime. Perhaps the best way I can illustrate what they did is to show you a theme park called Old Tucson, located outside of Tucson, Arizona. Here in 1939, in the desert outside of Tucson, the makers of the movie Arizona constructed a movie set out of adobe mud for the movie. It was later transformed into a theme park called Old Tucson. The owners have covered up many of the original mud adobe buildings with wood frame buildings that make the city look as if it had been built in the 1880s. Just as a point of non-important trivia, I've marked the spot with an X where actor and singer Dean Martin stood when he later got hit on the head in one of those John Wayne movies. Aren't you glad you watched this presentation this far so you could learn that? Of course you are. Now back to the presentation. As long as you walk down the main street of the park, the buildings look real. But many of these buildings are nothing more than a front, with no side, floor, or roof, but they give the appearance from the front of being a complete building. Take, for instance, this church building, because this is the front view. And this is the back view. And there is no building, but from the front, it looks like a complete building. As long as you look at the Constitution without really examining it, we see the magnificence of the document. But if you look behind the words, as we are going to do in a minute, you will find that it is all a false front, just like some of the buildings in Old Tucson. The Founding Fathers built a set like Old Tucson around the Constitution. We see the false front and think that is the Constitution. But those who walk around back and see the false back of the document know that we have bought some more fire engines, and other grain. The Founding Fathers had to construct this elaborate facade so that anyone who read the Constitution would see the aged man and his reflection and not the demon God. They were to see the power being divided, not the power being centralized. And because of this, we the people have missed the fatal flaw, the one that was intentionally placed in the Constitution so that it would later destroy the very rights it was intended to protect. It is my opinion now that the Constitution is the most oppressive document ever written by the mind of man. Article 1 of the Constitution created the legislative branch. Article 2 created the executive branch. And Article 3 created the judicial branch. We've been told that this was to divide the power and not give too much power to any one branch of the government. And it is in Article 1 and Section 8 that grants the legislative branch 18 specific powers, and these are listed one after the other. This reads in part, Congress shall have power to collect taxes, to coin money, to establish post offices, to declare war, for instance. Now I must commend the Founding Fathers for their amazing insight into the future. They had the foresight to predict that universities would one day field football teams, and that they would form associations to regulate all of their sports activities, including the scheduling of bowl games. This is an article in the Arizona Daily Star on December the 10th, 2009, in which a House subcommittee approved legislation aimed at forcing college football to switch to a playoff system to determine its national champion. I simply cannot understand how our Founding Fathers could have envisioned such a thing as a national championship football game in 1787. But certainly they must have, because Congress believes it has the delegated power to force the colleges to change their own procedures in declaring a national champion football team. And on a second review of all the 18 powers granted to Congress, I found this. Congress shall have the power to require universities who field a football team to switch to a playoff system to determine a national champion. Because the powers delegated in the Constitution are very specific, meaning that our Founding Fathers gave Congress these and only these powers. So if Congress feels they have this power, they must have it. Because congressmen and congresswomen take oaths to protect and defend the Constitution. And that means they must know what it gives them in the way of powers. Or so we have been told. But we have been lied to. So I made that power up. So we must find another source for the power to do this. And there is a power to force the football universities that play football to schedule a different playoff system. And this is what they wrote in part. It wrote in part in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, as they were granting powers to Congress. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. Notice that the Founding Fathers used the very same phrase, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, that they used in the Declaration of Independence to define the tyrannical power of King George. They gave Congress the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. And that means they gave Congress tyrannical power. The Constitution was written only 11 years after the writing of the Declaration, and many of the people signing the Declaration also signed the Constitution. It is impossible not to conclude that the Founding Fathers gave Congress tyrannical power. They did so in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. So that means that Congress must know that they have the power to force the universities to switch to a playoff system. They must know that they have total, unlimited power. And that power was given to them by the Founding Fathers in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. The power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. If I had the power to time travel back to the year 1787, while the Founding Fathers discussed the writing of the Constitution of the United States, and suddenly appear, I would not be too kind, because I knew what they were doing to the future of this nation. I would tell them that I knew what sort of document they were going to write, and that I considered them to be contemptible traitors to the American people. Because what they did to the American people is one of the most disgusting treacheries in the history of mankind. Because they did not inform the American people just what they were doing, because they knew that if they did, they would never be allowed to do it. And now we know just what the future they envision for us is, and I must say it is not pleasant. Let me now get current and discuss why the Congress feels it has the power to create a health care system that is close to passing here in December of 2009. This is President Barack Obama at a campaign rally, and the slogan behind him reads, "Change we can believe in." One of the changes he was campaigning for was a call to remake this nation's healthcare system. So the question is, where is the delegated power to do such a thing? Is there such a delegated power in the listing of the specific powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution? And any fair reading of those powers does not reveal any such delegated powers. But they do have this power. It is listed in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Congress shall have the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Now, it is important to notice that the writers of the Constitution did restrict that tyrannical power to just one place, Washington, D.C. They wrote, Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district as may become the seat of the government of the United States, meaning Washington, D.C. So the original intent was to limit this tyrannical power to the seat of the government of the United States, shown here by the map. It is also important to recall that the Constitution was written by the people of the United States of America. So they wrote about both the United States and the United States of America. This tyrannical power was intended to be extended only over the 10 miles square of Washington, D.C. They have limited power in the United States of America. That means that there are two constitutional governments in America, the United States of America and the United States. But the story of how this power has spread all over the remainder of the United States is very interesting. There was not much concern with the tyrannical government of the United States until the 13th and 14th Amendments